Welcome to the weekly Impact Sales VIP call for today. I'm excited about this call because one of my favorite topics came up this week from a couple of different conversations I had with people. One person that's in our community, and another was outside of our community. And the topic that came up that we spent some time talking about quite at length was competition. And today I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about a few relevant topics related to competition as it relates to your sales success, both from a general standpoint as well as from a positioning standpoint about how you can actually use your competition to your benefit. And we're going to dig into that for the first part of our VIP call today. And then we're going to open things up for some questions. I have a couple of other additional topics that came up, but I'm not going to dedicate any time to it unless we get to all of your questions first of all. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to jump right into the topic of competition because I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't spend some time thinking, wondering, worrying about competition and exactly what's going on with competition in their industry, how it impacts them, how it impacts their clients, and as well as what the overall outcome of competitive influences can have on their success. So this particular call was generated because a couple of people had asked me about this exact topic this week. And I thought it was relevant because, as we look at going into the end of the year, obviously every possible deal matters, every possible transaction, anything we can do to finish the year strong. And competition, for whatever reason, at the end of the year, seems to worry people a little bit more than it does in other times of the year. So I thought it was a great topic to dig into. We're going to spend some time talking about it. Now, ironically, we don't spend a lot of time talking about competition inside of Impact Sales Mastery. We do talk about it in other formats, in other content that we share. We do obviously get into it individually in one-on-one conversations, but we don't necessarily bring it up as a topic in Impact Sales Mastery in our foundational course. And ironically, the reason we don't is, where I'd like to start. And that is this. Like, I personally don't believe that competition will ever dramatically impact your success in whatever it is that you do. I believe that your greatest competition, whether you knew it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you own this in yourself or not, is probably yourself. It probably is yourself. And it may be a mindset issue. It may be a motivation issue. But when you look at all the potential competitive influences that are out there, I believe your greatest competitive challenge usually comes from within. It's usually something related to yourself. Now, we're not going to spend time digging into that exclusively today, but I wanted to start there because I think it's important that you understand that when you look at competition, the first rule of dealing with competition, whether it is internal or whether it is external, is to make sure that you are not the problem. Make sure that your particular position, stance, way of operating, make sure that you're not the problem. Now, I start there with people because I believe sometimes, and this is as a result of having, I don't even know, tens of thousands of conversations with sales professionals over my career, whether they worked with me, for me, whether I coached them, trained them, mentored them. I mean, thousands and thousands of calls. And whenever the subject of competition would come up and whenever we would dig into it, it would always come back to there was some degree of insecurity, some degree of uncertainty, some degree of lack of confidence in what that person was doing. That was really the impetus for the question, was really the motivation behind why they were concerned about it. Now, I'm not saying there aren't competitors out there. Absolutely there are. And we're going to talk about some of that today. But what I'm saying is that the first place you got to start whenever you get yourself wrapped up in competition is making sure that you're not making a bigger issue out of it than it really is. And I've talked to a lot of people that have put themselves into that position where, I could be successful if only my competition didn't do this, not realizing that they could position something differently and overcome that. The problem really wasn't the competition. The problem was how they looked at it. They were part of the problem themselves. And I just believe that the first thing you always have to do in any resolution of a challenge or an obstacle is to look inward and make sure that you're doing everything you can do to address the things you can control yourself. Make sure that you're not the problem. Make sure that you're not complicating the problem or amplifying the problem in any way. If it really is a competitive problem, then really it should be tied to the competitor and not tied to how you look at something, how you respond to something, what you do, how you feel about it. So keep that in mind as a starting point for today. And that's just what I wanted to open with. But when it comes to competition, I want to now pivot towards external competition, true competitors, people that do what you do or things similar to what you do that may pull from your prospects or your clients, true competitors and dealing with that. So let's jump into this a little bit and let's talk about what I call the number one rule when dealing with competition. The number one rule at the top of the list when dealing with competition, obviously after making sure that you're not the problem yourself. The number one rule at the top of the list is plain and simple. Do not ever, and I mean ever, get defensive about the issue of a competitor coming up in your interactions with your prospects or clients. Like the old saying goes, you never want to let them see you sweat. Well, in this instance, you never want to come off in a way other than yourself, other than how you normally would communicate. You don't want to seem defensive. Why? Because that defensiveness can be perceived as nervousness, as deceptiveness. People perceive emotional reactions all kinds of different ways. So when you act defensive in any type of situation, a lot of times people think you're hiding something, and that may not be the case, but just your reaction can paint that picture in their eyes. So the number one rule and the hardest thing to do sometimes for people is to not get rattled when the topic of a competitor comes up. It's going to come up. You're going to hear about it. You're going to hear people talking about name dropping specific competitors. You're going to hear them talking about general competition or general options. You're going to have it come up. So the first thing that you have to do to make sure that this doesn't impact your success is to not let it rattle you. Don't let it get to you. Don't let it bother you. Don't let it get you nervous. Don't let it put you in a position that makes you feel like you are uncertain as to your own capabilities and what the value and impact is that you deliver. That defensiveness can be read a lot of different ways. So the only way to avoid that happening and that whole roller coaster ride starting is to not be defensive, not get rattled by it. If a prospect or a client mentions a competitor, acknowledge it. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge it, right? Now, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to dig into this for a couple of minutes here before we open it up to Q&A, because I think this is a really important positioning tool. I think one of the things that you can become very, very good at in your sales mastery, your personal sales mastery, is understanding how to use other people's perceptions to your benefit. And the issue of competition is one of those examples. So the first rule, like I said, don't get rattled by it. Don't give into it. Don't buy into it. Don't get worried about something that really isn't an issue yet by somebody mentioning it. If somebody mentions a competitor or competition or another option that they have, acknowledge it, embrace it. In some ways, validate it as a potential option. And the reason that that is so powerful is when you respond that way versus being defensive, it expresses and shows them that you're confident, that you're not worried about your offering, your product, what it is that you do. You're not nervous about the impact that you have by the mere mention of a competitor. You're confident in what you're offering. And I will tell you, I've been on calls and I've been in sales interactions and sales meetings where I've seen people go the wrong way when the issue of competition came up. And I saw right before my eyes a transaction slip away. I've seen it multiple times slip away simply because that person's reactions to the issue of competition didn't rub the prospect the right way. It just made them nervous and uncomfortable. And in some ways, it alienated them from the person that was trying to win their business. So again, number one rule, don't let it rattle you. Number two, acknowledge it. Acknowledge it. If somebody brings up a competitor, acknowledge it. Now, we also want to kind of say hand in hand with this, that how you communicate about your competition says a lot about who you are and the professional that you are. You should never, under any circumstances, ever speak negatively about your competition. You shouldn't talk them down. You shouldn't mention negative things that have happened. You should be very neutral, very supportive of your prospects being interested in looking at options that are out there. And the reason is, again, sometimes you can alienate your prospects. If you're somebody that's perceived as speaking negatively about the competition, you're going to find that some prospects will immediately wonder, well, I wonder why they're doing that. Maybe I need to take a closer look at this competitor because clearly I make them nervous. So the only thing that you can do to control that, the only thing you can do to minimize that is to speak positively about them. Okay. Acknowledge them as a valid option. Now, that doesn't mean that you're endorsing them, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're pushing away the prospect. And a lot of people, a lot of sales professionals and people in selling environments, they think it's actually the opposite. They think if they acknowledge the competition that they're going to lose the prospect. In fact, most buyers will acknowledge the power behind a provider being open to the idea of speaking about the industry and what goes on with all of the people in relation to competition. See, the key to understanding this as it relates to what it is that you're doing is to control your emotions in the process, to not let your emotions get the better of you, right? So by speaking positively about your competition, by never talking down about them in any way, and not getting rattled at the sheer mention of them, you have kind of risen above the fray, the noise, all the people that are out there doing it, because you're coming off a little different. Not everybody does that. Some people get rattled. Some people immediately they hear about a competition and they'll say, oh, well, you don't want to do that because they do this or they do that. Or have you seen this in the newspaper about them? They go off on a tangent about speaking negatively about their competition. And you never want to do that. I will tell you that that's something that will undo more sales than what it will win. It will absolutely take you farther from the direction of success that you're trying to accomplish. So you want to stay away from that. So what exactly do we do? How do we position our sales success in the most favorable light when a competitor comes up, when the name of a competitor is brought up? Well, I like to follow what I call a very simple two-step process in how I deal with competitive influences and how I position myself versus competitors. Now, I'm not talking about a side-by-side comparison. I'm not talking about specifics of product or service and features and benefits. I'm not getting into that stuff. What I'm referring to is how you handle yourself as a sales professional, how you differentiate yourself, how you maintain and enhance your trusted advisor status. So the first at the top of the list as it relates to the two steps in dealing with the issue of competitors is when you're dealing with your prospect, and this is a really important one, and the mention of a competitor comes up, you should be prepared to prepare your prospect for what they will expect when communicating with your competitor. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means, number one, you better know something about your competition. You better understand who they are, what they're about, what their products or services or offerings are like, maybe a little bit about their pricing, their terms. The more you know about your competition, the easier it is for you to win business, right? So you should do that. You should have done your due diligence. So how do you position yourself versus them? Well, here's how you do it. You prepare your prospect on what it is that they will probably see or hear from your competition. Now, I don't mean in a negative way. Like, some people have heard this in the past and they thought I was saying to them, well, point out the deficiencies in the competition. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is prepare them for what they are going to expect when they interact with your competitor. Now, that is such a powerful positioning technique. I can't even describe it, because when you are confident enough in what it is that you do and you say to your prospect, oh, I understand you're going to speak with A, B, and C company. A, B, and C company is a great company. I know a lot about who they are and what they're about. Obviously, I'm an expert in my field. So you're probably going to hear something like this. You're probably going to get a little bit of information about this offering or this product, and then you fill in the blank with what you know about their product or service. Now, don't make it up as you go along. Make sure that you know it, and then you express it to them as to what it is that they're probably going to see. And that helps them manage their expectation. But what does it really do? Well, it sends a clear-cut message to your prospect. And I want to tell you exactly what that message is. And I want to be very, very clear on the power behind this. Number one, it validates your industry knowledge. It solidifies your place as a trusted advisor, because you're not only obviously an expert on what you do, but now you're an expert on what other people do, what other people say, what their offerings are, what their terms are, their product, their pricing, whatever. The more you know and the more that you can share for your prospects, the better you prepare them. Now, I know, because I know what some of my competition and competitors say and do. I know this particular point rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, a lot of people read this and go, "Oh, you would never do that. You would never direct them in the path of your competition. You would never tell them or validate your competition to your prospects." And I just disagree with that. I disagree with that because I believe that if you're really trying to be their trusted advisor, you're trying to fill in the gaps. You're trying to fill in the blanks when they have questions that need answers. When they're trying to get something solved, you're trying to solve that problem. Sometimes the solution doesn't come from you. And if you don't have the best solution and somebody else does, if you want to still be a trusted advisor to them, you need to point them in that direction. But when you know you have a great offer and it'll help them, you shouldn't feel any lack of confidence in mentioning and talking about the competition. And I know some of my competitors hate hearing that. Okay. Hate hearing that. I had somebody on one of my podcasts, and, we're still going through editing this podcast because we started mixing it up. We started mixing it up on the idea of competition. And what was interesting about it wasn't that we had difference of opinion about it. What was interesting about it was my belief and confidence that, one way or the other, you have to find the right solution for the prospect. And I believe that when you do that enough in the world, that good things happen and good people come back your way. And we just were butting heads about this. So, I think you need to be confident in what you offer. I think you need to be comfortable enough to speak about your competition as a valid solution. You never talk them down. You never only point out their deficiencies. Prepare them on what to expect. Now, I am not saying that you sell the prospect on the idea of working with that competitor. I'm saying prepare them for what they're probably going to hear and experience, because that just makes them feel confident that you are the real deal, that you are an expert in your industry, and that you're a trusted advisor, that you're somebody that's willing to do that. And that little seed gets planted in the back of their mind. Well, wow, Susie was confident enough to tell me that this is what they were going to say. This is what was going to happen. Now, here's what happens when you do this, and you do this the right way, and you're comfortable doing this with people. People have those interactions. And the whole time that they're having that interaction with your competitor, you know what they're thinking? I'll tell you what they're thinking. They're thinking, Susie told me I was going to hear this. Susie mentioned to me that they were going to talk about this. It's going to be Susie. They're going to be talking about you. And the reason is you prepared them for what to expect. You set the expectation, and then it came true. Why is that so powerful? Because you just underlined in big, bold letters your industry knowledge and expertise. And it was validated by your competitor because you were the one that actually told them what they were going to hear from them, what to expect. So you now solidify your trusted advisor status. I have lost track of the number of times that I've gotten calls back from prospects that then became clients. And what they said was, Joe, the call with so-and-so company actually kind of went a lot like what you said it was going to go like. Here's what they covered. Here's what it looked like. There was a couple of little things that were different, but pretty much it's what you said I should expect. And, I just want to let you know that you were right on point. Now, It's not about being right, obviously. It's about understanding what their needs are and being their own trusted advisor. So the second step in this process, and this is why this is such a powerful 1-2 punch as it relates to how we help people and what we do to win them over when we're dealing with competitors, is before I turn them loose to go back to the competitor, after I've prepared them for what to expect and I've validated my own industry knowledge by, clearly telling them that here's what you're going to hear from my competition, you have to do one other thing. And this step is really important. And that step is this: you need to ask them to follow up with you. You need to go back to them and say, I just want you to follow up with me and let me know how the conversation goes, how your meeting with them goes. I'm not saying you have to, but I would ask that you would, as a courtesy, just because I've shared a lot of what you can expect, that you will at least follow up with me. Now, I know some people may think, wow, people aren't going to do that. They're busy. They're not going to do that. I'll tell you what, if you set it up the right way, yes, they will. I've had people come back to me and say, I'm not making a decision right now. I'm still not quite sure. They have some good points. You have some good points. I'm not going to make a decision, but they came back to me. Most of the time, the majority of the time, I don't know what the percentages are, but it is the vast majority of the time, they come back to me and they say, you know what? That call was a lot like what you said you were going to do. And it's clear that you understand this business and what it is that you're trying to do. And I'd like to get started with you. That is what happens the majority of the time. And the reason it happens that way is plain and simple. It's because I wasn't nervous. I wasn't concerned about them wanting to deal or communicate with a competitor. I wasn't rattled by it. I didn't change the way my tone was. I didn't get upset by it. I prepared them for what to expect. I validated my industry knowledge and expertise by doing that. The competitor then just validated what I told them by doing exactly what I knew they would do, because I did my research and I prepared them. And I, once again, was solidified as their trusted advisor. That prospect felt like I was helping them. I was guiding them. Now, I didn't tell them, here's what you can expect, and then tell them not to speak to the competition. I told them, here's what you can expect. And please, all I ask is that you follow up with me and let me know how it goes. Okay. Now, here's another reason why this is such a powerful step, and then we're going to open things up to some questions. The reason why this follow-up is so important is, even if they talk to the competition and they're happy with the competition, and even if they might want to work with the competition, if that person has integrity and they do follow up back with you and get on another call with you, you have an opportunity to figure out exactly where things stand and win them over. You also have the opportunity, if in the rare occasion that you lose business to the competition, which doesn't happen often if you follow the impact-driven questions and you follow what we teach in Impact Sales Mastery. It doesn't happen often because you've set the table in a way that other people can't compete with. But if it did on the very rare occasion, you now are having yourself in a position to learn something that you didn't already know. You either win or you learn. And in this case, if that point the competition did win the business and they do follow up with you, which most people will do, at least as a courtesy, you have the opportunity to ask one of the most important questions that you can ask as a sales professional. And that is, I just want to understand so I can improve what I do and the value that I provide my clients and have a greater impact. What was the differentiator? Why are you moving forward with them and not me? I'd just like to know. So in the best case scenario, you prove your industry knowledge and experience, you win them over as their trusted advisor, even after speaking to the competition. Maybe they're not ready to make a decision, but you still own that right as their trusted advisor. The likelihood of the competition doing it as effectively as you do is not very high, especially for those of you that have been trained in ISM. And finally, if on the rare occasion the competition does turn that person and win that person over, you get to learn why. And learning why could make all the difference in the world for you. You may lose one deal, but it may teach you something that you didn't know that makes you win 10 others. So don't be afraid of loss. Like I tell people all the time, like every loss is just a win magnified, because if you learn from it, you're going to turn that around and make it into more and more business. The deals that I lost have helped me generate millions of dollars over the years in sales revenues, because they taught me invaluable lessons. They taught me things that I was then able to pivot and go and use later on. And it meant so much to me learning those things. You know, the reason why a lot of people fail in growth and development of their sales results, because really they don't learn enough as they go along. And when they lose to a competitor, they don't find out why. They don't find out why they lost, what the reason was, why they weren't able to ultimately win the business. If you don't learn why, you can't make it better next time around. You can't close that gap. You can't win that client over without understanding why you may have lost them. So it's really important that you understand that. These are just a few of the topics I wanted to cover around the subject of competition. The bottom line is, don't get rattled by it. Embrace it. If you have questions or thoughts or feedback on how you'd like to handle specific competitive situations, feel free to reach out to me anytime one-on-one. I'll answer those questions for you. I'll specifically go through and break down how you can position these things. You should never let competition change what you're doing. You should embrace it, understand, you know, how to leverage it and get it working on your behalf. So that was what I wanted to cover for today on that topic. So let's open things up to some questions. What questions do you guys have for me today? Any topic, doesn't have to be competition. Just unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question.
Hey, Susie.
Hi. So I, like many other small business owners, created my business because I worked for the competition. I worked for a lot of these companies, and I didn't like things that they were doing, or I thought this wasn't efficient enough, or that wasn't the right way to handle a client, or I just started accumulating knowledge of, I can do this better, I can improve this for the client, I can have bigger impact, etc. So in that sense, I built my business based on what the competition was doing wrong or not well enough. So when I talk to a prospect about what makes me different, I tend to have to go into the weeds a little bit with specifics. Like, I know that my competition, some parts of the process, they use like specific tools that I don't agree with. They use specific, and I know that we don't want to really go into the weeds, that we're trying to stay in the value part. So how do I make it clear why my process is better? Sure. Without going into specific tools that the client doesn't want to know about anyway.
Yeah. I think, and that's a great question, Susie. And that can be translated into a lot of different situations. I think, you know, how you position a situation like that really comes down to simplifying it as best as you can on behalf of the prospect, and saying things like, you know, they're a great company. They have many different offerings. Some of them are, you know, more confusing that what I would deploy, but it doesn't mean they're not valid. It doesn't mean they can't have an impact. Now, see, if I'm the audience and I hear that, I tend to think, well, it's going to be more complicated than I may want to deal with. And if you're the one that alerts them to that, the mere sight of anything that seems complicated or confusing to them is going to rub them the wrong way. And they're going to go, Susie told me that this was kind of what they were like. So I'm not talking them down. I'm just saying that they have a lot of complex things. I don't necessarily agree with them. Doesn't mean they're not valid. It just can be a little complex or confusing sometimes. You know, just leave it at that. You don't want to get in too much into the weeds. You're right. I wouldn't get into the specific issues unless somebody brings up a specific issue. I think that the way you have to deal with any of those situations is, unless they give you a very specific topic that requires more detail of what a competitor may do with it, you stay as neutral as possible. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And I'd forgotten about the whole emotional component. You just reminded me that it's really about their emotional response to something. So if I mention how they're going to, how they might feel confused or something, or they might feel that something's complicated, that's a feeling, that a negative feeling that they would have toward them. You reminded me of that it's about the way they feel about something, their reaction to something and how it impacts their life. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And look, I'm gonna underline that it's all about emotion. It's triggering the right emotion, in the person, but it is all about emotion. If somebody is looking to solve a problem, and you were the one that identified through the questions that we reviewed in ISM and digging into impact driven questions and getting them talking, their emotional level on that topic is very, very high. Anything that is perceived as making it harder for them to accomplish what they want to accomplish is not going to rub them the right way. But it is definitely all connected to emotion. You always want to embrace that. And that's also, if you think back to what I said a few minutes ago, it's also why it's so important for you to not react emotionally when people bring up competition. Sometimes people get like, you invest an hour and a half into a really in-depth conversation with a person, and you just feel like, man, I'm really connecting with them. And at the tail end of it, they say, well, I've got a competition with an appointment with ABC company tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to them about this. And it's hard not feeling gut punched when people do that, right? But you have to not react emotionally. You have to tuck your emotions away and say, look, I understand completely. They're a good company. I would check them out. Here's what you can expect. And then, mention the things that that are relevant, and don't mention the things that aren't relevant, but just give them enough ammunition to realize that your business because you warned them or prepared them. Okay, great. Other questions?
Hey, Joe, it's David.
Hey, David, how are you?
Great, thank you. Great topic. Sometimes this is a little bit of a comment, and then I want to get your take on it, and then I do have a question about a different topic. When people bring up competition, to me, I'm very, I'm well versed with what the other programs and competition does, and I will say, yeah, they're great. And a lot of times people have done it before. Like, maybe I'm going to go back to it. Like, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, and it's totally valuable and can definitely help you achieve your goals. Can I highlight some of the differences? Right now, would that be okay? And that generally is people want to hear, because when I do, people are interested in what I'm doing. They've reached out to me in most cases to find out more. So they're usually open to have a conversation. So maybe that's a little bit easier, but, should I be asking, if I can highlight the differences, or just validate the other company for being, being valid, and then just moving on?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with highlighting the differences. That's a lot different than being negative. That's just being a professional and preparing them. So no, I don't think there's anything wrong with highlighting differences to set the expectation as to what they may hear. There's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to ask for permission. I mean, you should normally be cordial about it, but I think you're doing the right thing by preparing them for it. Now, if they don't want to hear it, they don't want to hear it, but I think there's nothing wrong with highlighting the differences. And before you ask your other question, I want to make one point related to this. And I thought you were going to say this when you started asking your question, David, or making your statement, but this is very, very true. There's one particular thing that you have that your competition does not have. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. And that answer is you. If the issue of competition comes up after you've had a really great interaction with them and you've kind of walked them through the journey of, impact sales questions and all the things that it comes with, and them sharing the impact that these issues have on them, you've earned the right to be their trusted advisor and to help them. And I pretty much can tell you that the majority of time their competition is not going to go that far, or haven't gotten that far, or won't get that far with them. So you have a major differentiator in your hands, and it's you. If the issue of competition comes up, just remember, you still have you. You've earned the right. You've established rapport. You've positioned yourself the right way. You've done all the things that are powerful. So you have no reason to be nervous about them speaking to a competitor. Now, maybe the competition will be as good as you. Maybe they will have a great product or service, and maybe they will go through that process. But I will tell you, if you follow ISM the way we've taught it, you will beat out stronger competitors. You will win business because of that rapport. You will maintain your status as trusted advisor because of the rapport you built and the way that you made them feel and think about things. You asked things that other people didn't ask. So you become the differentiator, even more so in some regards than your product or service. Because maybe in some cases, and this isn't taking anything away from any of you or me for that matter, it's not like they can't go get quality services in other places, but they can't get you. So don't lose sight of that. I want to make sure that I covered that just in case we pivot and get off topic. But David, go ahead. What was your next question?
Before I get to that, depending on who I'm talking to, I have actually said that. I'm like, well, you don't get me.
Yep.
Look how we're getting along. I have used that.
Yep.
It's like, you're not going to have me in your corner through this journey. Who knows what you're going to get. But anyways, here's with regard, I was listening to one of your podcasts this morning when I was driving about the biggest mistake that people make. And it was, about selling to suspects instead of prospects.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges I have in that, my whole cycle when I'm speaking to a person, the whole thing takes about a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they were interested, something that was urgent. But a lot of times what I run into at the end is that as much as they would love to, they really can't afford it. And I'm not talking about the smoke screens, but I'm talking about like legit, like if I had known the person's situation better, because I'm not dealing with companies, so I'm dealing with like individuals, whereas like they can't afford it.
Yeah.
And then, it's not that long of a cycle. So it's not like I feel like and maybe sometime in the future they can, but when I suss out, how much money they have, or if this is something they can afford in a personal service, or qualify them, I guess I'm asking for, beforehand financially. Because sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm so sorry, I wasted your time. And, but sure. I don't know if you can answer that, because what I do is, I'm not selling a product exactly. I'm selling a service.
Yeah, no, I get it all the time. You have to, number one, you have to decide for yourself if it's worth your time to invest that half hour with somebody. If at the end of that half hour, you find out that they aren't really a prospect for what it is that you do. Now, it doesn't mean they won't be a prospect at some point, so you have to decide, every person has to make their own decision about how they handle that. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with pre-qualifying somebody before you get on a call with them if you want to preserve or protect your time a little bit. There's nothing wrong with asking two simple questions. Like, and the one may be, are you truly serious about wanting to make a positive health change in your life? Whatever it is, something that just is a commitment type question. And then the second would be, if you are, meaning like you got to have that. If you don't have that, second question doesn't matter. But if you are you able to commit X amount of dollars per month, or however you price it out, X amount of dollars per month towards your health and well-being? And unless you can answer both of these questions positively, it's probably not the right time for us to be talking. Right now, I would, under your circumstances, I would incorporate some degree of a pre-qualifier like that. And then, you know, it doesn't mean you don't schedule the call. You could still schedule the call with an understanding that one of those might be a no. And if one of those is a no, then maybe you just get right to it right away. I know some people, and I will be honest that I expect that I will quickly get to this here in the next week, where I'm going to need to look at those qualifying questions, and I'm going to need to say, I can't get on this call. And the reason is I can't spend that kind of time unless I know this person's ready or able to do this now. So, I mean, those would be the two things. The other thing that I would mention, David, is, you know, maybe you change the way that you slot these appointments a little bit. Meaning, if you're talking to somebody that is a yes, an emphatic yes over those first two questions I just gave to you, I wouldn't have a problem giving them more than 30 minutes.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And then if somebody is a no,
for somebody who's very excited.
Yeah. If somebody's a no, maybe you slot them for 15. Like
That's a good
15,
idea.
what, just want to get to know you. Just want to see where you're at. I understand maybe you're not quite ready today, but here's what we can do. Here's what this may look like. When you're able to say yes to these two questions, I'm your guy.
That's a good idea. Great.
Okay. Did that help?
Yes, it did. Because it made me think of situations where a person up front, you know, via text or email or, you know, something, said, listen, I just, you know, want to, you know, let you know money is tight right now before we have the conversation. And so usually when people lead with that, then, you know, then some of the things that I will share with them will say, okay, I think, you know, that might actually be doable. You know, so I don't think there's any harm in doing the pre-qualification as you suggested.
And look, you know, I don't know your business inside and out, but what I know when you're talking about certain offerings, many times the average person will have within their disposable income what they need to do something if they're really serious about it. Like, you know, grab your smartphone, look at every single app that you're paying for, every streaming service you have on your TV, and wow, conveniently you come up with $200. Like, you know, I mean, there's ways of qualifying and going through that process with different people. And then it's just a simple matter of, does it hurt enough yet? Does it hurt enough to give up Netflix for 6 months to change your life? Does it hurt enough to do this or that? And, you know, at the end of the day, and you know this, if those other things in total are more important and they're not able to shave off some of those things, you know what the success of them probably being successful would be anyway.
That's true.
So, you know, I think, and this is always a challenge for anybody who's developing a business. And this is why we underline the comment about don't sell to suspects, only sell to prospects. You know, you always are in the process of refining your processes. And one of those processes is, I need to spend less time on people, or less time speaking to people that aren't ready, and more time speaking to people that are. And that's just a normal sales effectiveness process that you should be looking at. It doesn't mean you don't interact with them. It doesn't mean you don't nurture them. It doesn't mean you don't keep them on your list and communicate with them and check in with them occasionally, but you're really careful with how much time you spend on it.
Yep, that makes great sense. I love the idea of slotting a 10 or 15-minute conversation to touch base.
Yeah. You know, it's professional, it's crisp, it flies by. it flies by.
Yeah.
But
Oh, absolutely. And it also creates really goodwill also, I
sure,
think.
sure.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
No, no, my
Question,
pleasure.
Joe. Question, Joe. Before we move off this, because
Yes.
I have a pen here and I wanted to make sure I write these two questions down. Can you quickly repeat what those two qualifying questions were again?
Yeah, of course. The first is, are you serious about making, like in David's case, you know, like a health and wellness commitment? Are you serious about changing your life in a positive way? You know, whatever the first question is, Adonis, it's tied to, are you really serious about doing whatever it is that you're trying to offer them? That's the first. And the second is, if the answer to number one is yes, are you able to commit and insert whatever dollar amount is required for them to be able to work with you, or you know, take part in whatever service you provide? You know, if the answer is yes, then are you able to commit this amount based upon whatever term to make this happen? And it's just two different questions. It's emotional commitment is the first one, and then financial commitment is the second.
The back half of that second question, are you able to commit to spending XYZ dollar amount to fix an issue? What was the last
to
part?
fix an issue, to address this need, to enact this change, you know, underline whatever that you're trying to do for them.
Okay.
And the key to those questions is, you know, they're connected to the same solution.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. See, and you know, honestly, I've been through this process multiple times where I always want to be as available as I can to talk to potential people, because I do believe that, you know, you never know where a prospect may come from, or like we talk about a lot in ISM, you know, you get paid in two ways. So you might get a referral there. And I do agree, but you have to be really careful. There are a lot of people out there that, you know, and I wish one day maybe I'll be one of these people that I have this kind of time, but they'll just book time to talk to everybody. And the problem is you can't fill your calendar up with people that are like that. That's just, it's not going to get you anywhere. Okay. Other questions? Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. I like this. Any other questions out there?
Hi, it's Susie. I just wanted to comment on what you just said about there are sales plans out there that encourage you to make as many appointments as possible with people and then have the conversations because they go by the numbers. That's what a lot of the, you know, we'll make you you'll make $25,000 in a week kind of, or 3 weeks or something.
Sure.
Those sales programs are actually based on those kind of numbers. Like if you talk to enough people, someone's going to buy. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Look, activity drives results, but you know, especially if you're working with a third-party resource that's helping you in some regard, whether it's filling appointments, whether it's, you know, scheduling certain things or whatever it is, you know, you're not doing it to just tick a box. You're doing it to get the right outcome, right? So you're absolutely right, Susie. You want to be really careful. You want to make sure that the time you spend is productive. You know, I don't have a problem if my schedule allows getting on a call with somebody that only says yes to one of those two questions. But if I'm in the situation and I've got two potential calls and I've got one that the answer is yes, absolutely, and the second question is yes, I have the budget to do this and fix this now, and then the other option is somebody that says, I don't know, I'm looking at options and my budget's kind of tight. Well, which call do you think I'm going to get on? But If I don't have a qualifier, I don't learn that lesson until I've chosen one, or I choose them both only to find out that one of the calls wasted my time. So the more you can incorporate those qualifiers, the more it allows you to make an educated decision as to how you spend your time. Now, maybe it doesn't mean you exclude spending time with people. It just may mean that you schedule things differently. And you can build this into automations, and you can do it manually, where if somebody sets up and they answer both questions as a yes, bang, they get the full time slot. If the one of the questions is a no, they get half a time slot. And if they answer no to both questions, they get 0 time slot, because, that's not somebody you can do anything with right now. So it's up to you to decide how well you qualify it. And there's a couple of schools of thought. And I will admit, I've bounced back and forth on this one, but I'm leaning more in the favor of what I just described. I used to believe that I would cast a wide net and I would draw as many people as I can to talk to me. But you'd be amazed how many times that process was more frustrating than having fewer appointments, but having the appointments that I did have be of quality. Like, there's been periods of time, where, I remember one week I had 25 one-on-one calls scheduled. And I thought, man, this is going to be a great week. But then when you take 40% of them weren't people that really were ready or qualified financially, all of a sudden that was a lot of time I spent talking to those people. They were clearly suspects. And I learned that lesson the hard way. So then you go to a qualifying process, and then you qualify them, and then you have many, many fewer appointments, but the outcome is probably higher because they're much more qualified. So only you can decide what the right approach is. I am forever and constantly trying to tap into the psyche of where people are emotionally and what they're doing. And my only recommendation to everybody who's here and everybody that might listen to the recording of this is that you have to make that decision for yourself, but choose wisely, because there's nothing more frustrating than running through a week of 10, 15 or more calls and have very little to show for it. You will feel frustrated. You will feel burnt out. You will question why you're doing what you're doing, because you'll say nobody's buying. And the answer probably goes back to that podcast that David referenced a couple of minutes ago. It's because you shouldn't have been selling to suspects. They really weren't prospects in the first place. Cut that number in half, start with prospects. You're probably going to convert people, and you're going to feel more rested, more energetic, and more excited about what you're doing. Your emotional place in what you're doing is still going to be very, very high. You're going to feel good about it, but only you can decide what that looks like for you. Okay, we still got 5 minutes for any other questions. Anything else you guys want to cover? Okay, well, we've covered a lot of stuff, so I am going to wrap up today. I appreciate y'all taking the time to be with me today. We've got a lot of stuff going on with the Sales Activist and Impact Sales Mastery. Excited about some new things coming both later this month and in January. So get ready. You're going to be seeing a lot of new things coming from the Sales Activist, things that are going to just be phenomenal to be around. We're excited about what's going on inside the community. If I can help anybody in any way, don't hesitate to reach out one-on-one. I will share this recording. Make sure you share with as many people as you can. This has been Joe Beck with the Sales Activist for the weekly Impact Sales VIP call, and we will talk to you all soon. Have a great week.
Hey, Joe, are you able to send us the link to the press release somewhere?
Yep, I'm going to send it all out. You're going to see it
Awesome.
all. Hopefully later today, you'll get it all.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day.
Yep. Bye.